1.
This is Chargers Unleashed Podcast. Here are your hosts, Dan Wolkenstein and Jake Hefner.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, will be brought to you by BetOnline, Charger Bolt Family, and Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, it's early. Good morning. Have you had your 3 cups of coffee yet? Are you awake? Are you alive?
I've got my 1 cup of coffee. How about you? Do you have your cup? I'm assuming you're already on your 3rd cup. You've been up since 5 a.m.
I mean, yeah, I'm a morning person. I don't necessarily need the coffee, but I do go to the gym in the morning. I have my pre-workout. Currently, I'm drinking one of those Prime hydration drinks for post-workout. Very, very good. I'm just not a coffee guy. I that's not me. You know, I don't take my medium coffee, cream, 2 sugars in the morning. That's just not me. And if it would have like 5 creams, you know, about 6 scoops of sugar and whatnot. But yeah,
it's basically chocolate milk is what you're saying.
Right. It's coffee's just never been me. But then every time that I've done that, I've always been like, 5 minutes later, like, yo, okay, it's time to work.
You're all cracked out.
Dan, go ahead, Dan.
Bolt fam, what is cracking? 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, 11:30 Eastern. No idea what time it is if you're in Europe or Japan. Welcome to Chargers Unleashed Live. Jake, it's been a minute since we've done these. For folks tuning in, viewing, listening live, submit your questions, comments into the chat, and we will do our best to answer, discuss as we go through during our live Q&A session. Can't wait for that one. It's going to be fun. In the meantime, please do us a favor. It helps us out immensely. Take 5 seconds as I continue to ramble on. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. It takes 2 seconds. Helps us out a ton. And if you have not already seen it, go to our YouTube, go to our Twitter and Facebook. You'll see our giveaway. We have a signed custom Keenan Allen jersey. Actually, it's right here. I'll get it out here in a bit. Powder blue custom Keenan Allen signed jersey up for grabs. Go ahead and qualify for your chance to win it. We're going to announce it the day before the draft starts. Bolt fam, pay the bills, as Denver Henderson says. Pay the bills, Jake. Pay the bills.
I love this personally because it's just basically like, okay, man, get that stuff out of the way. Let's talk football. Let's talk Chargers draft, everything like this. I've never been called out by anybody other than Dan to pay the bills. This is a first.
This is great.
Is awesome.
Denver Henderson, feel free to join the show anytime you'd like. You can step in for me. Jake Q, Denver Henderson.
Right. Denver, this one is for you. So I want to remind everybody that BetOnline remains your number 1 source for all of your sports betting needs this season. As your continued source for all sports wagering information, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events, whether that's NFL, NHL, MMA, tennis, boxing, or even golf. So head on over to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. And make sure to use that promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts.
So, folks, if you are in here, submit your first comment question. How are you feeling about the draft? Who do you think the Chargers are going to pick if they stick at 21? Leave it in the comments. We'll discuss some of these guys that you bring up. Who will the Chargers pick if they stick at 21? Jake,
here come the Bijan. The whole chat's going to be Bijan Robinson here in about 2 minutes.
If he's there. Real quick, let's get to some of these comments from folks who are here. Some of them came in as early as 2 a.m. Jake, let's start this thing off right off the clip. Dan, Jake, wow, oh my gosh, can't believe this is live. I'm so excited. I have some serious questions. Athir says he's bringing the heat, especially for his guy, Jake. I love you, bro.
This was at 2 a.m. I mean,
how many cups of coffee did he have?
I don't know what time zone you're in, man. I don't know if you're a night person. I like the fact that you have Charger stuff on your mind, but maybe get some sleep, dude.
maybe.
Just maybe get some sleep.
Zach Sesto, anybody familiar with an old Superchargers song from the San Diego days? You're talking to 2 guys who have been Chargers fans since the 90s.
Everybody should be familiar with the San Diego Superchargers song.
Whether it's that song, whether it's Schwarzenegger coming out, whether it's the flybys, like
Go Chargers.
Go Chargers, go. Apparently, Zach also came in. The intro song we had, Jake, the person who wrote the song originally went to the same church as Zach's parents. Zach, if your parents see them, please tell them to tune into Chargers Unleashed because they're famous, even more famous now. Denver Henderson coming from Miami, Florida, bolt up. We got Richard Vargas, Denver Henderson again. James Wagner, shout out, friend of the show. Good morning, Saturday. Jake, here we go. This is where the numbers of people that are going in for Bijan Robinson start. One person, he got Cansey. He's who they think, Elijah Cansey, which we'll talk about in a second. Man, but then we got Bijan Robinson.
Of course.
James Wagner says Bijan Robinson. Robert Somo says Bijan Robinson. Bees the boss. I like that. Bees the boss says Zay Flowers or Bijan. And then we've also got Dalton Kincaid up here. Jake, let's kind of just go through some of these as we start. Let's start with Zay Flowers. We've talked about him a bit. You and I have discussed here a couple times.
4 months.
Yes, a couple times. But I think one of the things I want us to kind of put out there is there's a difference between like the guys that I'm pounding the table for at 21 and the guys that I would be okay with at 21. Where does a one Zay Flowers fit in that for you? Are you bullish Zay Flowers or broke? Are you, I don't want Zay Flowers at 21? Or are you somewhere in the middle of I'd accept it?
See, the narrative has changed so much since we had talked about our wide receiver prospect rankings, since you and I first were talking about this wide receiver class going all the way back to late January. And remember where the draft projections were for wide receivers at that point in time? Before the combine, before the pro day, everybody was thinking that at least 4 or 5 receivers were going to go in the first round. And as we get closer now, some people are saying you maybe only get 2. So,
world.
And Zay Flowers' stock has just skyrocketed through this entire process. And along with JSN, who some people had months ago at either 4 or 5, is now a majority number 1 wide receiver in this class. And however you want to mix Quentin Johnson or Jordan Addison or Jalen Hyatt into that equation, the value for wide receiver in this class, specifically in the first round, has dipped a little bit. Again, not to say that any of these guys can't go out and be great players. We're just talking about the value of the draft chart based on the players that you would have first round grades.
Why do you think it's dipped?
You don't have a majority of the quintessential size and talent that you would have in historical drafts, or hell, even the past 3 drafts of what you had at the wide receivers.
But we knew that going into it. Like at one point there were 4 to 5 receivers, and then now there's 2. Like, well, what changed?
It's different. Let's not forget, at the combine you had 50. That's 50 receivers come out to train. Majority of them, as far as athletic build goes, you would translate that to the NFL level as a slot receiver. You're looking for a speed element. Some people don't necessarily need that number 1 wide receiver. You may try to build it out with a volume of receivers that are in this class. It's just a much different wide receiver class than we have had in years past. There's no Jamar Chase in this draft. There's no CeeDee Lamb in this draft. You don't have like your consensus top 3 guys that you could say are going to start falling off the board at number 8 like it did last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different class. And so the value of it is radically changes. The priority of it radically changes. But going back to Zay Flowers in this circumstance, Dan, if you were to look at all of the, let's just say the top 4 guys for this argument, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson, and not in a particular order, JSN and Zay Flowers, of what the Chargers already have in Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, we've been talking about this, almost feels redundantly every week, is speed, explosion, juice, things that Brandon Staley have said that they need to add to this offense. Zay Flowers, to me, is the one receiver, maybe outside of JSN, but he's the one receiver to me that brings that element. And even though that he would be coming into this team
in
as
the
a wide
first round,
receiver,
in the first round,
he would be coming in as a wide receiver 3 or 4 to start, but he brings that juice element that you would probably target if you passed on a wide receiver in the first round and targeted it in the later rounds. But he is the one exception to me that brings that element that the Chargers do not currently have right now. So he would be a guy that definitely, I've been bullish on Zay Flowers for a long time now, but at 21, if he was still on the board, I would 100% completely understand that pick based on the fit and what he brings to this team.
Now, I guess, okay, so then that's kind of where I am trying to get the crux of this. In my eyes, and I'll kind of I'll go 2 parts here. Part 1, the reason that the receiver class has become kind of low on the totem pole, if you will, is because you mentioned it before. Like, obviously, there aren't those size quintessential top tier ones. And then fast forward to the combine, there was a lot of underwhelming numbers you saw from the majority of the guys that you thought were going to fly. Quentin Johnston didn't run in the 4.4s like we saw some folks like Daniel Jeremiah predict that he could. We saw some folks like a Tank Dell. We saw some folks like even Zay Flowers, for that matter, were not running in the times that we thought they would. JSN didn't run in a great time. And because of that, the fast guys who folks thought, oh man, we can get a 4.3 guy, all of a sudden they become 4.5 guys, 4.4 guys. And at 4.4, are you picking those guys at 21 or at 15 or at 9? I don't know. And so it's important to kind of in context. Now, look, like running in spandex is different than running with pads. And there's different ways to track how fast game speed is. And some of these guys, you could look at them on film and say, damn, like those guys are fast. And I guess in theory or in truth, the combine stuff didn't really help showcase that for those guys. Now, the second part is Zay Flowers at 21. To me, I am not like super bullish on the Chargers taking any receiver in round 1. In fact, in my opinion, they should not take a receiver at 21. And I've said that simply because the top end of this draft class for receivers isn't great, but the second, third, fourth tier is tremendous, and there's a boatload of those guys. You can get way more value, in my opinion, in the later rounds of wide receiver. You can get one of the top end positional players, whether it's edge, corner, tight end, running back, if we go Bijan in round 1, and still get a plethora of options to fill that specific archetype that Zay Flowers is later on. So in my opinion, if they go Zay Flowers at 21, am I excited? Hell yes, I'm excited. Am I bummed? No. But do I understand it? Like, if I put myself in the Kellen Moore shoes and Brandon Staley of this, well, hey, if I don't win this year, I'm screwed. Yeah, I get why they would go Zay Flowers. I get why they want to go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs and the Bills and the Bengals. That makes sense to me. In my opinion, they could get the same or maybe a tick down of a player at receiver, but then also get a Kincaid, also get a Nolan Smith, also get someone else. They can go get Marvin Mims in the second, third round. And I don't think you're going to be sitting there next year or this year thinking about Dalton Kincaid and Marvin Mims and wishing you had Zay Flowers. I just don't. That's a 2-for-1 thing that, in my opinion, I would take.
I don't disagree, Dan. Like I said, Zay Flowers is the only exception for the wide receiver that I would have them select at 21. If it's not there, everybody's heard me talk everybody else's ear off about it for the last 3 years as far as why the Chargers need to trade back. I would be much more inclined to do that and get draft capital and then fill out a lot more of your needs with a number of different playmakers. But we'll see how the draft falls. As far as the wide receivers goes, Zay Flowers is that one element where, as you said, Dan, you could find in later rounds, but he's the one out of the top 4 that gives you that element that this Chargers offense has been lacking severely for years.
All right, we got to talk about this. This might bring some heat. Everyone talked about Bijan Robinson being the pick at 21. Denver Henderson comes in. As bad as I want Robinson, I would like for the Chargers to not pick him. It's a luxury pick, not a need. I want to see more play from Spiller and company. Let's trade back. If not, tight end, wide receiver. defensive end in that order. Lots to unpack here. So let's just go with the obvious. Jake, Bijan Robinson's on the board. So is Zay Flowers. Who are you picking?
First of all, what have the other 20 teams been thinking for the fact that they let Bijan Robinson slip to 21?
How lucky are we, right?
I still, as much as I have talked about the great fit that Bijan Robinson would bring to this team, I still highly doubt that he is going to make it all the way to 21.
So Chargers at 21.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That was very nice. Oh.
I have to sneak another one in there.
You got any more? Okay.
No, there's more coming. Don't you worry.
Just making sure. Okay, thanks. I don't believe that he falls that far. If he does, it is without a doubt something that the Chargers have to consider. And not to say that they would make the selection, and I totally get this argument for why they wouldn't, because it is a luxury pick. And the most likely scenario is Austin Eckler's coming back to play out the final year of his contract. You still have what you haven't seen from Isaiah Spiller yet. It's still going to be a running back by committee. Kellen Moore likes to do that. And if you were to select Bijan Robinson, and Daniel Popper has talked about this at length, for the needs that the Chargers have on this team, what are you going to do? Push those back? And you telling me, depending on who's on the board, or an opportunity to trade back to get more draft capital, you're going to go this route? And there's arguments to be made on both sides of it. You can't knock the playmaking ability of Bijan Robinson. He is absolutely incredible, arguably the number one offensive player in this entire draft. But at the same time, the Chargers are a little bit of in a conundrum for what they absolutely need to hit on this year. This year is vital for both Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco from a draft perspective. You are handcuffed from the standpoint of your salary cap, that you can't sign as many outside free agents as you had to fill certain holes. So if you choose to go a luxury pick for a position that you already have Austin Eckler, Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller, Tom Telesco has drafted a running back in the last 3 drafts. Is he going to make it number 4? I don't know, even for a player like Bijan, if that is the right move to do. Does it make sense? 100% for them to do it, because you add him to this offense, he's going to be a dynamic playmaker for you for years, for his ability to run, to catch. Kellen Moore would have a field day with Bijan Robinson in this offense.
Okay, so I'm putting your feet to the fire. Zay Robinson, Bijan.
21?
That's 21.
Oh, you mean Zay Flowers, Bijan?
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
You're picking Bijan. I'm at the draft party with you. There is not a chance in hell you're letting Bijan leave. There's no way.
If it was only down to those 2 players, yes. If we were talking about Bijan Robinson and a defensive player, that would be a different.
Nolan Smith.
Then I'm taking Nolan Smith. I'm taking Nolan Smith in that circumstance.
Oh, spicy.
Yeah, I would be.
Spicy. The Bijan Robinson thing is fascinating, and for what it's worth, I've been on record. I do think he's going to be available. If the Eagles don't get him at 10, which in my eyes, I don't think they will. They just put more money into the running back situation. They already got a 3-year deal, although they could probably have a ripcord. I think he falls. I do. And not because he's a bad player, but just because of what that position values right now. Early on, I've said I don't want Bijan Robinson at 21. I've come around to now saying,
good job, Dan.
I've come around saying I would understand why they would pick him at 21. And I can get excited very quickly if they bring him in at 21. And regardless of what happens with Austin Eckler, regardless of what happens with Isaiah Spiller and Joshua Kelly, Bijan Robinson makes this team better. And he makes life easier for Justin Herbert. Now, does he help, I don't know, expose defenses and help Justin Herbert shine more? I don't know. Semantics. In my opinion, I'd rather see the Chargers go in a different direction that could bring both speed at the wide receiver skill position and bring it at the running back position, which in theory they can do, getting Bijan Robinson and going a receiver later. it is a luxury pick, but Austin Eckler is going to be on this team for that long. He's already approaching 29. You could have Bijan Robinson on the books for 5 years on a rookie contract. Like, that's a pretty good safety valve.
I mean, I get the argument from both sides. Honestly, I do.
Yeah.
I think if I'm just thinking as far as what is the higher priority, I'm not saying here in a world where Bijan Robinson is greater than X player, because that's obviously a dumb argument to have. And it's a very obvious one for the value that you'd be getting with Bijan Robinson. I'm just saying the way that this team currently is constructed right now as it stands, what is it that you really need more? And I get it. Between need, BPA, the whole argument standpoint, I get all of that. I really do. And like I said, I don't even expect this situation to play out at 21. I really don't, because I don't see him still being available on the board.
Six pack on the line. You and me.
That he's still there?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Fine.
Yes. All right, we're gonna have to do a live shotgun of something. How about that instead? That's better. That's more fun.
That's fine.
A draft party. Okay, cool.
That's fine.
You heard it here first. That's gonna be fun. Okay, question. This one came up, and I think it's something that I have said from the beginning. I've kind of loosened up a little bit, but I still kind of believe this. Jason comes into the chat, says, I believe we absolutely need an upgrade at tight end. Jake, do we absolutely need an upgrade at tight end? We being the Chargers?
You do. Yes. I think you need a little bit more of a dynamic skill set in this position, and this is definitely the draft to do so. However, it's where you're prioritizing it now. Remember, this is how strange the whole draft season has shifted from 2 months ago, where virtually everybody was saying like, oh, it's going to be Mayer, it's going to be Kincaid. That is the slam dunk number one choice for the Chargers that they're going to do at 21. Then you go through the combine, then you go through free agency, and the narrative has completely flipped because the Chargers are now bringing back the exact same tight end group that they had last year. Now, I'm not saying that they're not going to select a tight end in this draft, but with the argument that we just had with Bijan Robinson and some of the other players that may still be on the board, with the higher consensus of people wanting the Chargers to trade out of that 21 spot, trade back and collect more draft capital, the priority, not the need, the priority for tight end has shifted to me to day 2, not to day 1. I think with this tight end class, you can definitely pick up a great tight end that you could develop into your number 1 when the days comes where Gerald Everett and Donald Parham are no longer on this team. Obviously, Trey McKitty has not panned out the way that we expected him to, but this tight end class is deep, and I think that you can find a dynamic tight end that can both get you the yak, catch radius ability to block. You can find that on day 2 more so for what you need as a team right now, as far as the priorities goes. It's a little bit of a luxury pick, kind of like the running back situation. You could consider that.
Yes, I agree.
So yeah, I would say my priority for tight end in this class is high. It's just not round 1 high.
Yeah. Do I think that the Chargers are in desperate need of a tight end in 2023? No, I don't. I like the skill set that Gerald Everett brings. The problem was after Gerald Everett, there's a drop-off. But in theory, Gerald Everett plus Donald Parham, that's a good 2 tight end set. That's a ton of versatility between those 2 players that should be able to do something.
Check it out.
Because Siri just went crazy on me.
Obviously, you said something that
I can't say. Okay, or not Siri. It's Alexa. I can't even say her name because then she gets nuts. Honestly, I like Gerald Everett. He's improved every year as a tight end, and he has never had Kellen Moore as his coordinator. I can see them working wonders with him. But does it sound enticing and damn fun to think about Justin Herbert throwing to Dalton Kincaid or Darnell Washington on this team? Who, in my opinion, it's those 2 who I think are the best fits for different reasons. But those are the 2 that I'm like, oh, but that would be sensational. I would love it. Let's get through some of these questions. We have a ton of topics. I don't know how I'm going to get through all these. So I'm kind of go rapid fire. Let's start with, who do I start with? Let's go with James Wagner. The excitement for this draft should be off. If at 21, Robinson is there, a 5-year budget-friendly player of this caliber under Kellen Moore is a great new beginning for the Bolts offense. I agree. Ken Mary, shout out to Charger Bolt family. Austin will return, which I think I agree with. I think he's back. Robert says, what if Eckler gets injured, God forbid? Joshua Kelly and Spiller might not be able to get it done.
Yeah.
Define get it done is, I think, a valid question, but also I am super bullish on this running game improving under Kellen Moore, regardless of who's back there. So if Eckler goes down, I think Joshua Kelly and Spiller would be just fine. Would they be great? Would they be Bijan Robinson? Obviously not. But I think they'd be just fine.
Dan, remember, I don't care what running back on whatever team that you put behind your quarterback. If your offensive line is not performing well enough, then it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So
but look at their offensive line.
If your offensive line is performing well this year,
if they're healthy,
you could open up holes for a Joshua Kelly.
You and me can run through those things.
Yeah. So the offensive line, to me, needs to improve more than this running back group.
Robert Soma, would you guys prefer the Chargers draft a top-tier defensive player?
If their offensive needs are all taken by 21. Yeah, depending on how the board falls to them. Again, Bijan falls into this exception where if he was there, it would be
take Bijan out of the equation.
Yeah.
Are you focusing defense?
Yes, I am. And I say this from the standpoint that you have to look at edge early. Obviously, with Joey Bosa going down last year, we know his history with injuries. Khalil Mack, when it was basically just on him and his responsibility to rush the passer, he wasn't able to get out of the double teams that you would hope to create any semblance of pass rush. What's beyond that, Kyle Van Noy, we don't know if he's going to be coming back with this team or not. We'll probably find out more after the draft. And Chris Rumpf, unfortunately, has not panned out. Really, the Chargers, and Dan, we talked about this last season. Going into training camp when the final cuts came out, the Chargers only had 3 designated edge players that they ended up going with. And you had Kyle Van Noy, who was kind of a flex between edge and linebacker. So they had that luxury of him as a player. But you need more juice at the edge position. You have to find out ways to rush the passer. Dan, let's not forget, the Chargers averaged about 25 points per game this year. Oh, I'm sorry, 24 points per game. Their defense gave up an average of 25 points per game. You've got to find a way to get to the quarterback and stop somebody.
Now, okay, I'm going to push back. Do you?
Yes. Yes, you do.
But honestly, do you or do you need to bulk up your offense? If you're giving up 25 points a game, score 26.
Okay, look, I get where you're going.
Score 26.
I get where you're going. You know, you try to follow the model of the Chiefs where they could just basically outscore anybody. And Brandon Staley was even talking about this as far as a strategy goes for this upcoming season. Like,
Jake,
we're just going to score points. I
was listening to Matt Money Smith talk about this. I think it was on the Chargers Weekly this week. He was saying, like, the Eagles defense that was like historically good this year got railroaded by the Chiefs. 38 points, I think they gave up. And they have all the guys in the world that you'd want rushing the passer. Honestly, what good does that do?
Number one, you're talking about Patrick Mahomes. Okay, so that is a microcosm.
No, that's what I'm talking about. What's the point?
Okay. In that same argument, Jalen Hurts basically played the better game in the Super Bowl.
And they still lost.
And they still lost because you couldn't stop somebody. No. So I don't care for the fact that it's a microcosm of the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The Chiefs ended up making 1 or 2 more plays than the Eagles did. And they lost. It was a great Super Bowl. It was a high-scoring game. It was very entertaining. In terms of what the Chargers need, the Chargers didn't have any semblance of that Eagles defense on this team. They did not.
Or that offense.
Right. But you also had a coach and a coordinator who knew to get the best out of their players.
Okay.
Chargers also didn't have that, and that's one other thing that is a whole different discussion, but it's something that they need to improve on.
They also had an offensive coordinator that didn't know what the hell he was doing with his team. And in my opinion. Denver Henderson, don't rule out Chargers drafting a safety at 21. My bold prediction. Jake, I have talked about.
There's only one exception for this.
I've talked about Brian Branch at 21 for 6 weeks now, 2 months probably. Absolutely love this kid. Can play basically every secondary position on the team. He was like the alpha dude at Alabama. And while he didn't perform incredibly at the combine, go watch him at Alabama. Like, that was a one-man wrecking crew. And imagining him with the Chargers and Brandon Staley's defense with Derek Ansley, like, what? Again, would I rather have him or some of the other guys? Different question. But, like, would I be jazzed if they got him? 100%. Do you think, how realistic is it that the Chargers go safety in round 1? Like, percentage-wise, what would you give it?
If it's Brian Branch, which is the only situation that I believe that this would end up happening.
Or Joey Porter. Let's say Joey Porter, Brian Branch.
I would say Brian Branch has a higher percentage because he's literally a Swiss Army knife. You could put him at safety if you want to. You could put him at corner if you wanted to and still get great production out of it. If it were me, again, as far as secondary players goes, and you cannot rule it out with the way that Brandon Staley's philosophy is when it comes to building the secondary, and Dan and I have talked about this, your revamped defensive coaching group is now made up of secondary coaches. Promoting Derek Ansley, promoting Tom Donatel, you sign Will Harris from Georgia Southern.
It's true.
You have secondary coaches all over the place on this team now. So it wouldn't surprise me. And a player like Brian Branch's caliber, yes, to your point, Dan, if you were to pair him with a Derwin James in the backfield, if you wanted to mix it up and be versatile with the defensive secondary and put him in the slot, put him outside at corner, if you wanted to test that out, he can do that. He is that versatile of a chess piece. And I'm surprised that people are not talking about
people are forgetting about him
more.
Brian Branch, Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr., and Mike Davis. And we're not even talking J.C. Jackson. Like, we'll see. Whew! That is clean. Darian Carlisle, best pod to ever exist. I think that's a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, no.
A little bit of a stretch.
Definitely not. But I appreciate the compliments, but definitely not.
But on that note, if you are enjoying this, please go hit the like and subscribe button. The amount of time it takes to do that isn't much, and it helps us out a ton. Hit the subscribe button while we're talking. Let's go on to some of the other ones, Jake. We've got a bunch of folks talking Bijan, which we've talked about. Bees the boss just slips off the tongue. Agree trading back is good, but I believe if Bijan or Zay is there, you have to take them, especially Bijan. I think you can't miss with Bijan versus who we'd be getting with these death picks. Okay, the second part we talked about a bit, but trading back is good. Obviously. The Tom Telesco era of the Chargers don't trade back. Or haven't traded back historically. Jake does not like that. I think there's a higher likelihood that they trade back this year, given what's going on. But, like, I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket. Like, if that happens, we're about to see Jake break his back trying to do a backflip at the draft party.
Yeah. And most likely I'll land on the table and I will actually have a broken back. So,
yes,
that's what will happen.
So, it's funny because I think a lot of people are like, oh, the Chargers trade back. They're going to be like, oh, day one was so boring. I'm like, I'd be over here throwing a party. Now, if they trade back and like Bijan Robinson's on the board and they trade back.
First of all, if that happens, get ready for Chargers Twitter to just be set on fire.
But if that does happen, that most likely means somebody is trading up and giving them a haul to go get him.
Trading up for a running back?
For that running back.
I get that. He bucks the trend of first-round running backs.
Mm-hmm.
But when was the last time that you remember someone trading up for a running back that was taken to the first round?
When's the last time you saw?
I mean, hey, our organization did it when they took Melvin Gordon. So
that's true. Jorge Rodriguez, take Dell. People,
Dan, I mean, the floor is yours in this one.
We've all heard how excited I am about the possibility of having Tank Dell on the Los Angeles Chargers. And there have been comments out there on the interweb saying he's arguably the best route runner in this entire draft class. Some have gone to say he's one of the best route runners of the last decade, which that might be a little bit of a stretch, but go watch him. And some of the moves he puts on are insane. Pairing him with the Keenan Allen, but giving that dynamic aspect of a game. Now, 20 years ago, this would be a much harder sell for me. A player like Tank Dell, a player like a Marvin Mims, or a Zay Flowers even. Like that archetype, smaller frame, smaller stature, but just getting blown up 2 decades ago. Like imagine like Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, like Rodney Harrison just laying the hammer and causing concussions left and right. In today's NFL, when you can't hit folks like that anymore, and when you see folks that can just elude everyone, size doesn't matter if they can't catch up. Size doesn't matter if you can scheme in a way to where they have no hands on them. If you don't get hands on Tank Dell, not a chance in hell there is a secondary player in the NFL who can keep up with him. Put that on the Chargers with Justin Herbert. Oh. Now, you can say the same thing about Zay Flowers in a different regard. Say the same thing about a bunch of these guys at wide receiver. Trey Tucker could be interesting. Trey Palmer could be fun. Damn. Give me Tank Dell. It would be so... He honestly, of all of the guys the past probably 3-4 years we've been covering the Chargers, he has been the one that I have been like, can we please, like, can I have just one nice thing? I know we got Rashawn Slater, like we've had great picks, but like, man. Jake, Fitness is telling us that we have to do a rectal beer chug if Bijan Robinson's there at 21. Will you do one? I won't. Will you? Please?
I did not know. I did not know that Chargers Unleashed all of a sudden became Jackass with Steve-O taking a rectal beer chug. I'm not Steve-O, so you won't see any of that happening. Okay, but you know what? I appreciate a dirty limerick every now and then, so I do appreciate the suggestion.
Okay, great transition. Dirty limerick, girthy guitarist, tight end and speed wide receiver. Also some linebackers that can tackle. Jake, we talked about tight end, speed wide receiver. Linebackers, over under the round in which that you'd be comfortable with them picking a linebacker. I'm gonna go over under 3.5. No, 4.5. Over under 4.5.
Well, considering how much this Chargers team values linebackers,
zing.
I'd have to say with the other priorities that you have on the board with wide receiver, tight end, and edge, I don't think, much like Tom Telesco has drafted them, with the exception of Kenneth Murray in the past number of years, I think he starts considering linebacker depending on who may still be on the board. But I think that he starts thinking about it at the beginning of day 3.
Day 3. So that would be okay, but over under 4.5. Would you feel comfortable at 4? If he first pick of day 3,
depending on who's still on the board, yeah. I would think that the conversation starts at the beginning of day 3.
You're going to see a lot of people go crazy if they pick linebacker at pick number 4.
What would be the problem with that? They obviously need it. They don't have anybody currently behind Eric Kendricks and Kenneth Murray, so you need to address it. But I just don't think that they address it on day 1 or day 2. What's the problem?
They run one linebacker in like the large majority of their sets anyways.
Dan, you still need depth for crying out loud.
Okay, fine, but you can find depth in round 5, 6, 7 undrafted.
Right. I say the conversation starts on day 3. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be around 4.
Ken Mary from Charger Bolt family. Can we get lists for Herbert's shoes so we can throw over the defensive line? Okay, there's part hilarious joke here, but also part truth.
Yes.
Why the hell?
I don't know.
Why the hell does Justin Herbert throw so many batted balls? You know what? Honestly, I think I know the answer. At least previously, all of the routes have been in a place in which they can be batted down. I bet you know how many balls did not get batted down that were thrown deep? All of them. All of them. Let's keep going with all these. Got a bunch of you here that I'm trying to get to.
I like how people are saying that for some reason I've gone off the rails in this. episode.
Oh, have you?
I'm trying to figure out why. Explain to me why that I particularly.
Jorge, let us know. Jake has got off the rails in this episode. Why has he got off the rails? Now I'm curious. Is it because
I'm just fired up, man? I'm enjoying a live show. That's all it is. I don't know what the hell off the rails is.
it may have been the girthy or the whatever thing ahead of that.
Girth is a term that is used very well off of the live shows for sure. For some reason, it always gets mentioned in this show. It's a great inside joke.
It's super weird. Charger Chat Podcast, friends of the show,
Boys.
Shout out. If you have not had a chance to go watch what those guys are doing, honestly, they're so fun, so funny, and just a joy to be around. Go check them out. They're awesome. I've been on the show a few times. We're going to have to do a collaboration here soon, guys. Jake, what are our plans for the draft this year?
Well, I know that the Charger Chat boys are going to be actually going to the draft. They were actually invited to the draft party this year. So it will be, invite. They did get the invite. I actually sent it to Kevin. I sent it to Kevin in, I think, November, because I wanted, obviously with him traveling, I wanted him to just get kind of an early notice about it. And unfortunately,
you wanted him to have no excuse to say no.
Yeah, I wanted to give him every excuse to, and obviously going to the draft at Kansas City is a pretty damn good excuse. So yeah. I totally get it. But yeah, draft party, 3 days of gluing my ass to the couch and enjoying every bit of it.
Yes. Can't wait. We're actually going to be doing some live coverage of the draft from the Hefner residence. So be on the lookout. LAFB will be representing in full. Let's see, Jake, who else want to go with? What questions you got?
Fire away, dude. Just fire away.
Okay.
Apparently I've gone off the rails, so okay. I shouldn't be talking.
Robert Soma, we want to know your final predictions for the 21st pick, and who do you guys want it to be if you're the Chargers GM? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say right now, I'm not answering that.
This is such a Dan Wolkenstein type of question right here.
Yes, but we're not answering that. Stay tuned. Jake, shout out to Tu Papa. I've got the annoying voice today. So nice. You're off the rails. I've got the annoying voice. But either way, Tu or Papa, whichever one is your first name, appreciate you joining in. Feel free to put it on mute whenever I'm talking, unmute when Jake's talking. But thank you. I appreciate your feedback. You're a gem. James Wagner, Unleash is always great approaching draft day. Shout out to Jake. That was super fun. Solo man, Jake, here's a fun question for you. What are you eating or drinking before pick 21 to calm the nerves? We were just talking about this.
This is a good question. So I'll start, I'll have a variation of Corona and Modelo in the refrigerator. I will start the draft with that. Probably I'll get about, with the Chargers picking at 21, I'll probably have about 3 of those. Maybe around pick 15. I will switch it up to my favorite bourbon of choice to really calm the nerves, because I know I'll need it. And then it's actually a good primer, because if I hate who the Chargers end up selecting at 21, or if they make a wrong decision, I'm already kind of one deep at that point. So it'd be like, okay, well, guess I got to drink some more.
Speaking of off the rails, here's a fun question. Blaise Gaspari. It's not going to happen, but would you trade the number 2 pick for Kyle Pitts? Rumored that he is unhappy in Atlanta. That's my attempt at making a less different annoying voice. Nice. Yeah. How was it? Did it sound good?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of worked. Okay. I almost thought there was a different someone on the show.
Oh, great. Okay. Would you trade your second round pick for Kyle Pitts?
There's an argument to be had for that. I think the way Atlanta has utilized Kyle Pitts since he has been drafted has been very, very strange. Has been very strange how they have utilized him. I think if you were to bring Kyle Pitts to this team in which Kellen Moore values his tight ends, you would get a lot of production out of him. So considering that you may be using your second round pick on a tight end anyways, I've heard this argument, and there's an argument to be had for that.
We're rounding out Chargers Unleashed live. Get your questions, last minute comments in the chat. We'll do our best to get them in. We've got about 10 minutes here before we go. Jake, so it's been an interesting draft coverage season, if you will, for the Chargers and for us and for, I think, Chargers fans in general. It feels like there's a little bit more angst, hostility, nervousness, fear in this fan base for how the Chargers are going to handle the pick at 21 or just the draft in general. Kind of an open-ended question, but I think one that is probably the cause for a lot of this angst is just the sheer gravity of the draft this year specifically. Not only for the Chargers players that come in, but for a Tom Telesco with Brandon Staley, a franchise with a quarterback like Justin Herbert, who's about to get his bank truck backed in with how much money he's about to get, in a division with Patrick Mahomes, when they don't have a receiving core that's very fast, who's getting old, paying like $50 million to two players, it feels like. There's a lot of weight, and it feels like pressure on this year. And I've said it, regardless of what happens this year, there will be a turning point. Either Chargers succeed, Chargers push the envelope, Chargers push past, and they overcome. Brandon Staley's a great coach. Tom Telesco stays. Or they don't, and big changes happen. Like one of those, in my opinion, one of those two things will happen. So, which of those two do you see happening? I know you're generally the pessimistic one of us, but I'm asking you, you're also the realist. So, of those two, which one are you putting your money on?
So, give me the two scenarios just to make it clear.
So basically, Chargers step up. Chargers improve. They win a playoff game or two. They draft well. Telesco stays. They answer the bell. They beat Mahomes. Those kinds of alternative. They, in a sense, fail again.
So you're asking me what I think the greater chance of which scenario happening is?
Yeah.
Well, look, the Chargers know that they have to contend with the Chiefs first. It's 7-time division champions. You have to find some way to solve that Rubik's Cube. And whether that's in the regular season or the playoffs, you just have to figure out how to climb that mountain. But you also have to be drafting in a way to where and they've talked about this, you can't just draft to beat one team. You have to make your team in various ways better. And Tom Telesco has had his good draft moments, but there's been other times, and namely even just going back to last year, if you were to look at certain picks and question them. And then even not just who he selected, but then for the fact that they don't see any playing time in their first year and where they were selected, Dan. So he has these ebbs and flows of picks that are really, really good, solid fits that he hits on. And then there's other ones that just really make you scratch your head. As you said, this draft holds so much weight for him and Brandon Staley. And I personally think that the two are linked. That if Brandon Staley is gone, Tom Telesco will be gone too if you are not able to make a push in the playoffs this year, which is win one or two playoff games. After basically getting the pass on blowing a 27-point lead in the playoffs, which a lot of GMs would not, or a lot of owners would not be able to look past, and they would have made a switch after something like that. After essentially getting a pass after that situation, they have to hit it this year, and they have to improve as a team, and they have to perform better. I think for what they have done from the coaching ranks will definitely help that. Now you have to do it from the personnel standpoint.
Shout out to Craig Mager.
Wow.
Chargers legend.
Hence they answered one of my questions. That the dreaded third round that has every Chargers fan literally just sitting back, biting their fingernails and wondering who the selection is going to be. Hopefully we don't have to experience that one this year.
Chargers fans, this is your last chance. Enter your questions. We'll kind of go rapid fire here at the end of the show. Give us your questions, comments. Again, please hit the like and subscribe button. We love doing these. Let us know. Give us your feedback. Do you like these live shows? How would you change it? What would you do differently? Are we still off the rails? Give us questions. I don't care.
Dan's voice for starters. Let's
For the last
maybe if
question.
we can get like a filter to where like Morgan Freeman is coming out instead of Dan Wolkenstein's voice. I mean, that would be, and it may actually put some people to sleep in a very nice way because, Morgan Freeman's voice is just fantastic.
Would that be fun? Okay, question. Jake, last one from me. Then we'll open up the floor to the listeners and viewers. Looking at 2022 season and how that ended, what is more important and what needs to improve most? Chargers offense or Chargers defense?
This is almost in the same weight, dude. I mean, they both need to improve because there is arguments to be made, obviously statistically, and what the Chargers gave up, especially at least in a microcosm of the run game for the Chargers defense, that has to be improved. You can't get much worse than that. And we said it earlier this week, Dan. I would assume that Jay Rodgers, first day that players are allowed back in training camp, is just going to be rolling those clips of players ripping off 40-yard gains against this team on repeat. So they have to get better in the run game from a defensive perspective. You flip back to the offensive perspective, the coordinators have changed. And we talked way too much about the play calling, the conservative play calling of Joe Lombardi, and how that hindered that team in a way. It almost felt like it put Justin Herbert playing with one arm tied behind his back. But there were a lot of factors that went into the Chargers not performing offensively. Justin Herbert's injury, offensive lineman not performing properly, offensive lineman getting injured, not having a majority of your wide receivers for the entirety of the year. So they have to have a little luck on the injury front as well. But from a coaching standpoint, I've said it, good coaches and good coordinators are able to adapt around injuries. You can do that. The Chargers have to figure out how to put that together if they are willing to contend. And if their message that Brandon Staley has said that we want to go into this season as far as putting more points on the board, then this whole offensive philosophy should be in for an overhaul. Well, Dan, considering you're on, so you muted yourself. Apparently, you were annoyed with your own voice. That was great.
Nuts and Bolts comes into the chat with a question. Potential trade back scenario with the Steelers for 21. Chargers end up with picks 32 and 49 and 54 in the second round. And at 32, they go Darnell Washington. 49, they go Keanu Benton or Mozzie. And then 54, they go Tank Dell. So they end up with Darnell Robinson, one of Keanu Benton and Mozzie, and then Tank Dell. What are your thoughts?
There's parts of it that I like, and then there's other parts of it that I don't like.
I don't think I'm doing that.
I love Keanu Benton and Mozzie. Let me just put that out there. I love them as players. I think if you added them, and we haven't talked that much about the interior of the defensive line, but you need help because Fajoko's gone. You let Tillery walk last year. Joe Gaziano got signed by a different team. So it's Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, who's coming back from an injury, Tito, who's coming back from an injury, and Morgan Fox. You are going to have to address that position at some point in the draft. I think if I got a trade like that, I'm good with two of those picks. I probably would have used the second one on whatever edge player is there. So a Thule, one of Dan's favorites, a Derek Hall, for example, if he's still there in the second round, I probably would have addressed edge in that particular circumstance.
Robert Somo. All right, we're getting to the rapid fire, guys. We got about 5 minutes left. Rapid fire questions starting now. Jake, do you think the hiring of a new athletic trainer will help minimize the injuries? For context, just for context.
I mean, at a surface level, you would hope so.
But, and hold on, context. First year Staley was here. Chargers injuries were fantastic. They had close to none that were super impactful. Last year, different story. But year one, they were great. Year two, not great. So this hasn't been all bad. But new athletic trainer, does it minimize?
I don't know. The narrative around the Chargers is that they're always injured, right? And that's been the narrative for the past decade, essentially. So, but the Chargers have had years where they have not had a lot of injuries. 2018 was one of those years when they made the playoff push past the Baltimore Ravens. Last year, obviously not so much, but the year before that, as you mentioned, Dan, they were not that injured. They just could not put it together from a coaching standpoint and a win standpoint. So, I get it. At the surface level, it may seem just easy to say like, oh yeah, an athletic trainer would just totally change everything, but it's not guaranteed. Sometimes you just have the shit end of luck.
True. Shaggy Elwood asked the odds of Branch, Mingo, and Kuntz being available for picks. I mean, honestly, the odds are great, but all three of them are going to be available for the Chargers when they pick. Will they pick them? Different story. Like, it just depends on what round we're talking about.
Right. I mean, yeah, if we could get a round designation for each one of those guys, that'd probably make it a clear argument. But I love all three of those players.
James Wagner, appreciate the feedback. Keep the live shows coming, much better than ESPN, Fox, or NFL Network content. Again,
James, I love you, buddy, but
a little far.
Come on.
There's some pretty great. Well, okay, there's some great talent on those networks. I'll leave it at that. Zeke is up, according to Blaze. Zeke is down to us and the Bengals. If no Bijan and X stays, do we grab Ezekiel Elliott? I'll put the price again. I think you're going to say price. So I'm going to say, excuse me, I'm going to say they can get him for, let's say, $7 million a year.
Dan, this is
no?
my question.
Yes or no? Because rapid fire.
Look, I say no, and here's why. This would, in my opinion, this would piss Eckler off more than if the Chargers were to select Bijan Robinson at 21.
Right.
Because for what Eckler's cap hit is right now, and you telling me in your circumstance, Dan, that he would come in at $7 million, so you're going to add more, essentially, cap usage towards your running back room by not paying the guy who's performed for you admirably over the last 2 years and put up great numbers from a statistical standpoint, but you're going to bring in an additional running back at a higher cap space. Yeah, I'm sure that he's going to be really happy with that one.
A lot of people are not liking the idea of Zeke. You got hell no from DZ. Jorge rather draft a running back. We've got Fitness saying can't afford him. And Cade saying I'm pissed. There's no way. Everyone's saying, also, Jake, you got a great point there. Eckler would be pissed. One last question came in, Jake, before we hit this one out of here. Would you rather the team, this comes from Jorge Rodriguez, would you rather the team stock up on offensive line depth or defensive line depth?
Surface level, I would say offensive line, just considering the number of injuries that have happened to that group for the last number of years. In the same breath, you look at how the Chargers performed against the run this year, and you just need some guys that can stop the run and, hell, get some interior pass rush, which the Chargers have not had in some time either. So the priorities are there for both. I'd probably say that I may even kick it up a little bit, just considering who's there right now. I would probably kick it up a little bit on the defensive line that I would say has a little bit higher priority.
I'm going to go offense, and I don't think it's close. I think this team lives and dies with Justin Herbert. I don't think this team lives and dies with the defensive line, regardless of who's there. And if you can't protect Justin Herbert, you're not going anywhere. So I'm going to go offensive line. I'd rather have them have 7 starters on offensive line, just in case you need to break glass. I'm good to go. All right, Jake. Do you think Quentin Johnston dropping passes is because of Max underthrowing him? Now, he's a fascinating prospect, and there are people that have him as wide receiver 1. They have people that have him as like wide receiver 6. First round talent, definitely not first round talent. Where are you? Is he falling because of the quarterback play, or is something else?
I don't know. And so many people have said it's like, oh, because, the quarterback that he was playing with, he didn't get that many opportunities to showcase what he can do. And you see that from the statistical standpoint. You're like, how, why does this happen? Quentin Johnston, to me, again, he's not a Mike Williams clone. I get why some people would make those type of similarities.
No, he's not.
But
he's not.
It's different from a standpoint of, and again, you can almost put this in the same kind of breath as, you have, okay, here it is. A number of these wide receivers, especially ones that are at like the top 4. And then of course you have your second tier of wide receivers that are much in the same breath. There's not much that separates them, but there's a lot of these guys that are like, jack of trades, master of none type things, or they only bring like one element. So like, for example, a Jalen Hyatt, for example, everybody's like, okay, it's downfield speed. As long as he runs fast and runs past his defender, he's going to be able to benefit your offense. But outside of that, you're like, okay, well, what else is there? And that's when people start to consider this. With Quentin Johnson, downfield, jump ball catcher, but what else is he going to be able to bring to your offense? And this is where coaching and offensive schemes need to fit. I think a lot of these guys, as far as the wide receivers go, Dan, it could even be more of an argument to say it's not just from what the wide receiver skill set is. It's more so the fit of the team that they're going to and who's going to utilize them properly. That's really going to end up benefiting them.
True. Jake, we can go live and go on with these for 3 hours. It feels like these are always so much fun. Time goes by fast. That's going to be it for the live Q&A. Jake, I think we're going to have to do another one of these before we go.
100% we're going to be doing one
into draft week.
Draft.
As we get out of here, Jake, I'm going to start. You know what I'm going to try to do? I'm going to start trying to answer some of these questions as we log off on this and mix them into the outro, if you will. Guys, gals, thank you so much for tuning in to Chargers Unleashed. This has always been a blast doing this. We do this every year, and it seems like you guys are liking this. So we're going to keep doing it. Tight end and wide receiver are both important, and so are you. So thank you so much for joining into the show. Look, we always want to give a round of applause to all of our listeners who come in and talk to the Chargers fans and talk to us as well. Will Clapp is so-so, but also cheap. But hey, we'll take him because we need depth. But the Chargers could go looking for center. Jake, we are only 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks away from the NFL draft starting. I can't wait. Guys, gals, thank you so much for tuning in to Chargers Unleashed. For Jake Hefner, you can find him at Jake D. Hefner. Myself, you can find at Dan W. Sports. God bless. God love you guys. Have a great week, Chargers Nation. We appreciate all of you. We'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed. We love you guys. Bye.